A crisp Thursday morning hung over Birmingham, the sky looking freshly rinsed. Sunlight angled through oak branches, casting golden patches across the courtyard of Jefferson Middle School. The school gate stood wide open, greeting students' lively footsteps, sharp laughter, backpacks, swaying sneakers, pressing into the thin mist that hadn't yet burned away. Few noticed the quiet girl sitting under the flagpole in that crowd, Danielle Carter, 13. Pale blonde hair tied neatly at the back, soft blue eyes glowing with an undefinable gentleness, hands resting lightly on the wheels of her chair. No one crowded near her, no one paused to ask. In a world constantly in motion, Danielle sat like a quiet pause, looking through like an old chair misplaced in a vibrant scene. Danielle was born with a condition that left her unable to walk, but that had never stopped her from smiling. She was intelligent, polite, and laughed softly. Anyone who had heard it wouldn't forget. But at Jefferson, smiles weren't enough to be treated fairly. Some names echoed through the hallways like warnings. Brandon Keene, 8th grade football captain, rich kid, tall and confident to the point of arrogance. Always followed by two satellites, Troy and Zayden, who laughed at every mean-spirited joke Brandon made. That morning, Danielle was trying to push her wheelchair up a small ramp toward her classroom, just a few more turns. But then heavy footsteps echoed ahead. Brandon, Troy, Zayden. They said nothing. They just stood in front of her like three cold walls. Troy bent down, tapping lightly on the wheel. Should install a jet engine on this thing, Zayden scoffed, to run faster from bad grades. Danielle didn't reply. She bowed her head, hands still gripping the wheels. Brandon raised an eyebrow. All right, move aside, but not by stepping aside. He grabbed the chair frame, shoved it forward and lifted it. The wheelchair tipped. Danielle fell to the pavement, her back hitting the ground. A dry thump sounded not loud, but loud enough for a few students nearby to stop. A strange silence hung. Then came scattered laughter, awkward, hesitant, uneasy. No one stepped closer. No one offered a hand. Danielle didn't cry. She just lay there gazing up at the sky through the leaves, whispering something faintly as if holding herself together. But someone heard. Jailer Freeman, just stepping off bus 12. Brown eyes flashing with anger, not at the fall, but at the silence of the bystanders. Jailer wasn't popular, an honors student, and wasn't the class rep. But she had something rare, quiet strength, a fire smoldering beneath, waiting for the moment to blaze. She walked straight to Danielle, kneeled. "Hey, you hurt?" Danielle shook her head slightly. A trickle of blood formed on her elbow. Jailer turned around. "Was that funny to you?" Her voice rang out cold as sharpened steel. Brandon shrugged. "Not your business." Jailer stood up, locked eyes with him. "Wrong." "It is now." Jefferson's courtyard that morning was no longer its usual bustle. After Danielle's fall, a silent tension crept into the air, like everyone had heard the impact, but no one knew what to do. Or worse, they didn't dare. Jailer Freeman didn't ask another word. She gently picked up the backpack that had fallen from Danielle's wheelchair, refastened every strap. She didn't make a scene, yell, or pull out her phone to record. She just acted, quietly but with weight. Danielle was upright again. Her hands still trembled, but her gaze stayed bright, unbroken. "Thanks," Danielle whispered, barely audible. Jailer pressed her lips together. "Don't thank me. Thank yourself for still sitting upright." At the edge of the crowd, a few students craned their necks. A younger girl bit her lip. A bespectacled boy looked down at his shoes like they no longer mattered. Something in that hallway had shifted, not massive, not clear, but a first crack in the invisible shell around indifference. Brandon and his gang had disappeared like bullies do when no one's laughing anymore. A few minutes later, the hall monitor arrived, panting eyes unfocused. What happened here? Jailer met his eyes. Nothing. It's over. He frowned, about to ask more, but Jailer was already pushing Danielle's chair towards class. No one stopped them. No one spoke, but in Jailer's mind a thought had taken root. That afternoon, Jefferson Middle hosted the Unity Challenge, a traditional event encouraging teamwork and overcoming differences. Students were randomly grouped for games, puzzle-solving, obstacle courses. But Jailer didn't leave it to chance. She found Ms. Carter, her homeroom teacher. "Ma'am," Jailer said firmly, "I want to join the challenge this afternoon, and I want Brandon, Troy, and Zayden on my team." Ms. Carter raised an eyebrow, startled. "Are you sure?" Jailer nodded. "Very sure, but I'll need your approval and a little coordination." Ms. Carter didn't ask why. She just nodded because in Jailer's eyes there was no rebellion, just a terrifying clarity. At precisely 2 p.m., the backfield buzzed like a festival. Pop music blared, coolers popped open, and students wearing headbands by team color, red, blue, yellow, and purple, raced back and forth in a flurry of energy. Brandon, Troy, and Zayden stood together in red shirts, half-lidded eyes. They thought it'd be a light-hearted afternoon, some joking, some showing off. Until Jailer walked out. A fitted athletic top hugged her shoulders, her hair tied high, and the captain's badge was pinned to her chest. No one laughed. No one reacted because her eyes, without a word, froze every joke in place. "Welcome to Team Jailer," she said, not shouting. "Today we're not testing strength, we're testing spirit." Brandon scoffed. "Big deal, still just kid games." Jailer didn't answer. She just turned and announced final challenge team relay. Losers clean the cafeteria for a week. Winners get invited to the leadership lunch with the principal. A hush fell over the field. Every teacher has heard. The principal had already approved. Jailer clapped, "Form up." At the final leg of the race, a wheelchair sat waiting, and next to it, Danielle Carter, arm bandaged, wearing a deep blue tee. Face neutral, not smiling, not angry, just calm, as if waiting to see who had the guts to cross something bigger than a finish line. Brandon frowned. Jailer spoke each word slowly. "You'll be pushing her." Wind stilled as Jailer pointed to the chair. A few students stepped back and whispers rippled. Brandon Brooks stood, frozen fists clenched. What he asked unclear, if to Jailer himself or the slap of humiliation hitting him square. Jailer stayed calm. Rules are clear. The final round pushes a teammate in a wheelchair through the obstacles. Fastest team gets to choose who attends the leadership lunch. She turned to the PE teacher holding the mic. "Coach ready?" Coach Martin nodded. "Challenge starts in 60 seconds. Brandon bit his lip, not from fatigue. He knew this wasn't a game anymore. This was public. A mirror he couldn't smash. And Danielle, the white girl he shoved that morning, was looking at him. Not angry, not pitying, just waiting to see if he deserved to push that chair. Troy stepped back. "You're not doing this right." Jailer didn't turn. "It's not him doing it. It's Brandon. He made Danielle fall. He's the only one who can help her cross the finish." The whistle blew. The race began. I was once like that too. In the second month, Principal Ellis invited an educational theater group from New York to guide students in transforming their stories into short plays. Not to portray someone else, but to perform their truths. Danielle worked behind the scenes, helping direct and write scripts. Her hands had healed, but her posture was straighter, as if each time she shared her story and was truly heard, a part of her healed with it. Jailer trained the new storytellers, not with theatrical dramatization, but with the art of speaking the truth to its core without shouting. Jefferson Middle School was no longer just a neutral name on the district list by the third month. Local newspapers began reporting. Parents from other schools sent emails asking for the Light Program Guide. A regional radio station invited Danielle and Jayla to share their story on a morning segment. And during a live interview on AM 1170, when the host asked Jayla, "What keeps you going with this?" she smiled and answered, "Because some people go their whole lives without speaking. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they don't know how to start. We're just creating a space where they can begin." 3 months after the first storytelling session, Jefferson Middle School had visibly changed. But like any place transforming, quiet resistance remained. And one Monday morning, that resistance stepped out of the shadows. It began with an anonymous post on social media, a photo of Danielle being pushed by Jayla through a hallway captioned mockingly, "Super duo, one can't walk, one can't shut up." The line beneath hit even harder: Jefferson, where telling the truth gets you labeled as divisive. Within an hour, the post spread through student groups. Each share cut deeper, and when Jayla saw it, her first reaction wasn't anger, it was helplessness, as if their entire journey had been reduced to one cruel meme. Danielle sat still, no tears, no words, but in her eyes, once bright with conviction, there was only exhaustion. That day, no one spoke of the post, but everyone had seen it. And the silence this time wasn't empathy, it was fear. Fear of being labeled, fear of choosing sides. That afternoon's light group meeting was half empty. Those who once raised their hands confidently now looked away. A 7th grade girl whispered, "I'm sorry. My parents don't want me involved anymore." Jayla looked at Danielle, who clutched her wheelchair wheels so tightly her knuckles turned pale. Then through the heavy air, Jayla stood up. "If we stop because of an anonymous post, the author was right. They said we're weak, that we'd give up, so if we stay silent now, aren't we just proving them right?" Her words didn't cause an uproar, but they stirred something quiet. A student lifted their head, another sat up straighter, and Danielle, after 10 seconds of silence, whispered, "We need to respond, but not with another post." They didn't fight back. They created a silent read for truth. Each student picked a quote poem or line that reflected their values, printed it, folded it, and placed it in a box in the library. Anyone could draw one and read it quietly during breaks. No names, no microphone, no spotlight, just words. Day 1, 6 slips. Day 2, 27. By the end of the week, they had to replace the box with a cardboard crate. Inside was one note that made Principal Ellis tear up. "I once laughed when someone fell. But today I want to stand still and catch someone, because I too once fell and no one reached out." Principal Ellis showed up at the light group meeting the following week, holding a folder. "I've requested permission to make this a formal curriculum program. Not because our school needs recognition, but because students elsewhere deserve the chance to rise again." Danielle didn't speak, but for the first time in days, she smiled faintly. Not because it was over, but now she knew a passing cloud hadn't extinguished the light. It was still there, waiting for someone to open their eyes again. 1 month after the Silent Read for Truth initiative had spread throughout Jefferson Middle, the first invitation arrived. The Alabama State Education Conference sent an official request for the Light Group to present their model at a special forum on schools and empathy. It would be the first time Danielle and Jayla were invited to speak in front of students, principals, education directors, and even political representatives. The group prepared for 2 weeks. Each member selected an anonymous short story from the library box that had once made someone cry, bite their lips, or reflect on themselves. Jayla chose the story of a 6th grader who was teased for stuttering. Danielle chose a different one of her own, but wrote it as if it came from someone else. A girl with wheels instead of legs once thought she was an obstacle, until she realized she was the only pause that made someone slow down and listen. The day of the conference arrived. The Montgomery Education Center was packed. Outside, a small group of parents held signs, "Schools are for math, not emotions. We don't want our kids emotionally programmed." Danielle and Jayla heard it, but they didn't stop. Inside, they walked onto the stage. The lights weren't blinding, but bright enough to silence every whisper in the auditorium. Jayla began, "We're not here to complain. We're here to tell the stories that once kept others silent." Danielle continued, her voice soft but resonant like a piano in a ceremony. "At my school one day, a girl was pushed down and no one said a word. Not because they agreed, but because they thought, it's not my business. So we started writing. Not to beg for pity, but to remind others silence is a choice too." Some delegates nodded, but in the second row, a middle-aged man representing a group of traditionalist parents raised his hand and challenged them. "I'm touched. But what exactly are you trying to teach my kid? Are emotions enough? Can you tell me how this is useful in a classroom?" Jayla didn't blink. "Sir, if your son stood before a classmate in a wheelchair and saw them get pushed down, would the math test that day be the only thing you care about?" The room went dead silent. Danielle took a breath. "And if that child were yours, wouldn't you hope someone reached out, or at least stood still?" A round of applause broke out, not from everyone, but from enough people to shatter the lingering chill. After the forum, school delegates from 3 other counties approached the Light Group asking for a copy of the program framework. One older private school principal whispered, "I have a student who uses a walker, but he hasn't had a close friend in 3 years. Maybe I need to start with my library." As for the opposing parent group, they didn't disappear, but they were no longer the only voice in the room. That evening, Danielle leaned against the window on the return bus ride to Birmingham. The streetlights glided over her calm face. "What do you think?" Jayla asked. Danielle smiled. "I think the light isn't shining in our school hallways, it's spreading." The end of the school year arrived as swiftly as a summer rain. Just weeks ago, March had been filled with tension and silence. Now Jefferson Middle School buzzed with decorations and excitement, students bustling to prepare for the year-end ceremony, traditionally a quiet event filled with familiar awards. But not this year. On the school's bulletin board, a new headline was printed in bold: "Celebrating the Voices of Courage Special Program of the 2024-2025 school year." Principal Harris initiated the idea, the same man who once sighed when the surveillance cameras failed to capture Danielle's fall. He proposed this isn't about honoring academic or athletic achievements, it's about courage. And who better to start than them? Backstage, Jayla wore a simple white dress, standing beside Danielle, her hair tied up, eyes radiant, waiting for their turn on stage. "Nervous," Jayla whispered. Danielle shook her head and smiled gently. "Not anymore, because this time we're not alone." The stage lights came on, and amid the applause, 2 girls, one standing, one seated, stepped onto the stage as if it had been built just for them. Jayla began, "Today, we're not here to discuss what we've done," Danielle continued, "but about those who were once silent and chose not to be anymore." She turned her head, nodded slightly, and from both sides of the stage, one by one, others stepped forward. First was Thomas, a white student who was once best friends with Camden, who laughed when Danielle fell. Now he held up a proposed renovation of campus walkways for disabled students that he had quietly submitted to the school board. Next came Lucy, a 7th grader with an anxiety disorder who hadn't spoken in class for a year now, standing at the microphone reading a short passage. She wrote, "I don't need to shout to be heard, but I also don't need to be afraid to exist." Then came Camden. He walked forward holding a sheet of paper. In the audience, some people leaned forward, others looked skeptical. But he didn't look away. "No apology can erase what I did. But I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I'm here to prove I can learn from the beginning, not from a textbook, but from those I once looked down on." Danielle looked at him. She didn't smile, but she didn't turn away either. Then from the wings, Principal Harris stepped forward. In his hands was a small wooden box inside, which was a newly created school emblem, to be awarded each year, the light badge given to students who stand back up after falling and help others rise with them. This year, the first badge was awarded to not one but two people: Danielle Carter, Savannah Brooks. The entire hall rose. This time, it wasn't just applause, it was the unified footsteps of a community that had changed. As the ceremony ended and students flooded the courtyard to begin their summer break, a small group gathered around Danielle. Among them was a sixth-grade girl with curly hair clutching a notebook. Would you sign the first page for me?" the girl asked softly. "I want to write too, but I don't know how to start." Danielle leaned down, took the notebook and wrote, "Don't wait to grow up to be heard. Start by not staying silent, even if it's just one sentence. At Jefferson, we used to think silence was safety. But now we know the safest place is your voice, because it protects not just you, but everyone around you." And in the soft light of late afternoon, a black girl pushed her friend, a white girl, in a wheelchair across the schoolyard. No one stared out of pity. No one was curious. They just smiled. Because they knew right here a story had just rewritten how an entire generation understood courage.